Over 400 years ago, a woman knelt in prayer and saw something that marked her forever: a vision of hell, so terrifying that her body trembled, her heart raced, and her soul understood in a fraction of a second that everything she thought she knew about God had radically changed. Saint Teresa of Avila emerged from that experience transformed, and her words about that sacred dread still resonate today, penetrating the hearts of those who dare to read them. But why? Why? In 2024, do the words of a medieval mystic manage to awaken in us the very same fear she felt centuries ago? The answer is simple and profound. Because that fear wasn't just hers, it was universal. It's the fear that has always inhabited the human heart. The fear of death, of separation, of emptiness, of one's own insignificance in the face of the infinite. And Teresa's vision touches on what the modern world desperately tries to suppress: the spiritual urgency that tells us there is something infinitely greater than ourselves. Something that demands a response, a true conversion, a complete reorientation of life. In this video, we will walk through the 7 mansions of Teresa, beginning precisely at that moment of sacred terror, and discover something surprising: that the fear she experienced was not a punishment from God, but an act of infinite mercy. That each terrifying vision, each anxious night, each moment when you felt your heart would explode with fear, all of this was God whispering, "Awaken, return, let me transform you." We will explore how that medieval vision still heals us today, how it transforms terror into tenderness, and how it invites us on a journey of inner peace that transcends all anxiety and worry. The fire within. Teresa's vision of hell is a catalyst for soul transformation. The vision of hell that Saint Teresa experienced was not a divinely imposed punishment, but an act of profound mercy, allowing her to feel eternal reality in order to reorient her soul. That terrifying experience functioned as a spiritual surgery, removing layers of illusion and attachment to earthly consolations. It was in the fire of that terror that Teresa discovered the true depth of her love for God. What appears to be mere terror is, in fact, the soul awakening to its own capacity for transformation. The mansions teach that it is precisely in these moments of inner crisis that the soul can leap to the next stage, leaving behind the false comfort of the first mansions and advancing toward a genuine intimacy with the divine. Teresa's infernal vision was the first great call that mobilized her from spiritual repose to contemplative action. Do you also know this awakening? That moment when life forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, and suddenly everything takes on new meaning? That's where the transformation begins. And it is precisely this turning point that we will explore in Teresa's mansions. How fear, when offered in prayer, becomes fuel for the soul's ascension. Spiritual fear and inner liberation. Teresa's mystical psychology of hell. The spiritual fear that Teresa described in her vision was not paralyzing, it was liberating. When the soul truly understands the seriousness of separation from God, it is freed from the invisible chains of worldly attachment and the illusion of false security. Teresian spiritual psychology reveals that fear, when properly integrated into mystical prayer, acts as a catalyst for breaking false identifications with the ego and empty desires. Teresa taught that a soul inhabited by genuine reverential fear of God is a soul that begins to see clearly. Its racing thoughts slow down, its worldly worries lose weight, and an inner space of stillness and trust emerges. It is not the paralyzing fear of modern anxiety, but the kind that quiets and centers. It is as if the vision of the abyss helps the soul discover that there is an infinitely greater refuge. The heart of God is the paradox that Teresa experienced. The more deeply she confronted spiritual terror in prayer, the more inner peace she found. Do you feel this restlessness in your own heart? This feeling that something is out of alignment? It is precisely at this point that contemplation begins to work, transforming fear into trust, anxiety into the loving presence of God by your side. The first mansion and the fear of damnation, beginning the journey to God. The soul that enters the first mansion still lives scattered amidst the distractions of the world, trapped by the existential fear of death and eternal damnation. Even if it doesn't consciously admit it, it is at this stage that Teresa places the one who has not yet truly understood who God is, and therefore who they are. The vision of hell acts as a cruel mirror that forces this soul to awaken. There is a reality beyond earthly pleasures, and this reality demands an urgent response. The great gift that God offers in the first mansion is precisely this awakening through fear. Not to terrify, but to call. Teresa described how the soul then begins to seek refuge first, outside itself, in external practices, in works of piety, in frequent confession. But it is necessary to go through this phase of sacred fear so that gradually the soul learns to turn inward, to the inner silence where God truly dwells. Are you still in this dwelling? Feeling that restlessness that won't leave you in peace? That subtle fear of wasting your life, of being far from God, of not being ready if death comes. This is the voice of the first dwelling, calling you to recolimiento, to contemplative rest. It is the beginning of the true path of perfection, and in it, God is already present, waiting for you. Terror is grace, the neuroscience of mystical fear and divine intervention. When Teresa experienced that terrifying vision, her body went into a state of total alert, her heart racing, her breathing heavy, every fiber of her being concentrated on that instant of pure terror. But here lies the mystery. God was there, within that terror, recalibrating the neurology of her soul. The infernal vision functioned as a divine intervention that reconfigured her thoughts, her priorities, her capacity for love. Acute fear, when received in prayer, produces spiritual neuroplasticity. The soul reorganizes itself around God. Modern neuroscience of fear reveals that moments of intense crisis can completely rewrite neurological patterns without using scientific terms. Teresa knew this intuitively. The terror she experienced did not traumatize her, but profoundly transformed her into humility and trust. That critical event freed her from her own psychological defenses, opening space for a much greater receptivity to divine grace. The soul that knows true terror is a soul that has learned to trust not in itself, but solely in Jesus. Are you experiencing a night of dread or anxiety that seems endless? Know that God is working in you with the same loving precision He worked in Teresa. That sleepless night, that fear that awakens you in the middle of the night, it is a prayer from God for you, woven in the silence of the shadows. And soon, you will discover that it was there, in that abyss, that you found the safest refuge. Hell in the inner castle. Psychological interpretations of Teresa's vision. The hell that Teresa saw was not merely a physical place of fire and torment. It was an inner state of total separation from God, of absolute isolation, of disconnection from the source of all life. When we interpret Teresa's mansion symbolically, we understand that hell also exists within the human psyche. It is the experience of being closed in on oneself, imprisoned in the ego, incapable of loving or receiving love. It is the soul that has built such high walls around its heart that it can no longer hear the voice of God calling it back. Psychologically, this inner hell manifests as chronic despair, unresolved guilt, soul-crushing shame, and disconnection from oneself and others. The contemplative prayer that Teresa teaches us functions as a process of psycho-spiritual integration. The rejected parts, the buried fears, the shadow we don't want to see, all of this is brought to the divine light. In the presence of God, what seemed to be hell begins to be healed and transformed into compassion for oneself and others. Do you recognize in your own heart those arid places, those dark corners where fear or unconfessed guilt dwells? Know that bringing these inner realities into the light of prayer is not dangerous, it is liberating. God does not come to condemn what you discover within. He comes to rescue, restore, and return to your soul the capacity to love. And that is precisely what happens when you boldly enter the next man. God allows fear to awaken love. Teresa's vision as spiritual surgery. There is a profound paradox in Teresa's spirituality. D used fear not to punish Teresa, but to purify her and realign her with true love. The infernal vision was a spiritual surgery performed with divine precision, removing tumors of attachment, scars of vanity, dead tissues of false security. When Teresa emerged from that terrifying experience, she was not the same. She had lost her fear of the things that had previously held her captive and discovered such a burning love for God that no suffering could overcome her anymore. Herein lies the radical compassion of God. He allows moments of crisis and intense emotional suffering, not because He is cruel, but because He knows that it is precisely these moments that can completely reorient a soul. Intense fear, when offered in prayer and trust, becomes an instrument of grace. The soul that undergoes the divine surgery of terror and remains trusting God discovers a peace that the world cannot give, because this peace no longer depends on external circumstances, but is rooted in union with God. Are you going through a time when you feel like everything is falling apart? When fear seems greater than hope, and the nights are long and lonely? Offer that fear to God in prayer, not as an accusation, but as surrender. Say, God, I trust that even what scares me most is an opportunity to know your love more deeply. When you can do that, the surgery begins and healing draws near. The soul's descent before ascent. Teresa's vision and the dark night of the senses. Every great spiritual ascent is preceded by a descent, a plunge into the depths of one's own inner darkness. The vision of hell that Teresa experienced precisely marks this moment of necessary descent, what she would later call the dark night of the senses. It is as if the soul needs to touch the bottom of the abyss to understand that it cannot save itself, that its only hope lies in surrendering completely to God. In this descent, all spiritual consolations are withdrawn, all psychological security disappears, and only the nakedness of pure faith remains. Teresa understood that this purifying descent is absolutely essential for progress in the mansions. Without it, the soul remains trapped in external consolations, in the superficial emotional experiences of faith. But when God allows this night, this dread, this anxiety, this feeling of being completely abandoned, is because He wants to prepare the soul for ever deeper encounters with His presence. It is like a plunge into dark, cold waters that prepares the body to ascend higher than it has ever ascended before. Are you experiencing this night right now, feeling that God has withdrawn, that your former consolations have vanished, that even prayer seems to bring no comfort as before? Know that this is a sign that God is raising you to a new stage. The descent is merely the preparatory movement. Soon, when you least expect it, your soul will ascend to the higher abodes, where union with God no longer depends on emotions, but on a silent and absolutely real presence. Hell, as an inner symbol of the disconnected soul. Teresa and the neuroscience of separation. Hell, in its spiritual essence, is the experience of disconnection, being cut off from God, isolated from the source of life, unable to receive or give love. Neurologically, this separation manifests as a state of extreme fragmentation. The amygdala in constant panic. The nervous system trapped in defense mode. The soul unable to find the vagal tone. That state of safe rest, where the divine presence can be felt. Teresa's vision revealed a truth that modern neuroscience confirms. A soul separated from God is a soul in intense suffering, frozen in fear, unable to experience true peace. The great gift of Teresian contemplative prayer is that it rebuilds these inner connections. When you sit in silence before God, when you offer your fear and trust, when you allow the divine presence to penetrate your racing thoughts and chronic anxiety, something extraordinary happens. The neural pathways of connection with God begin to be reactivated. Isolation gives way to a visceral sense of being sheltered, of being known and loved exactly as you are. The soul that was in hell becomes once again a temple of peace. Do you feel this disconnection in your body? That feeling of being adrift, without an anchor, as if floating in the void? This is an invitation. God is calling you back home to the inner castle where He dwells. Every prayer, every moment of silence, every act of trust rebuilds the bridge that unites you to Him. And gradually, the inner hell gives way to the safe refuge of God's heart. Contemplative fear, How Teresa's vision heals the modern soul's apathy. The modern world suffers from a silent epidemic. Spiritual apathy, emotional numbness, the inability to feel true passion for life or for God. Many souls live in a state of mechanically passing through their days without awakening to the sacred mystery that surrounds them. Teresa's terrifying vision, when properly understood, acts as a spiritual wake-up call for this modern. Her sacred terror rekindles in the human heart that lost capacity for reverence, for recognizing that there is something infinitely greater and more important than everyday distractions. Teresian contemplation offers a different kind of fear, not the neurotic fear of clinical anxiety, but that reverential fear that awakens the soul from its lethargic slumber. When you truly understand the greatness of God, the fragility of your own life, the urgency of true conversion, something fundamentally changes. Racing thoughts gain purpose. Anxiety transforms into spiritual vigilance, and the heart begins to beat again with passion and meaning. This is the grace that Teresa received in that terrifying vision, and it is the same grace available to you. Do you recognize in yourself this numbness, this spiritual indifference that feel enough just passing through life without truly living? Teresa invites you to awaken. Allow the sacred to frighten you a little, not to paralyze you, but to liberate you. Let the vision of what truly matters shake you from your torpor. And when you awaken, you will discover that life takes on colors you didn't know existed. From terror to tenderness, Teresa's vision and the healing journey to divine union. Teresa's journey through the interior castle begins with terror, that terrifying vision of hell in the first mansion, but ends with something radically different. A communion with God so profound and tender that human words can scarcely describe it. In these 7 mansions, Teresa traces a complete psycho-spiritual arc, from paralyzing fear to unwavering trust, from chronic anxiety to peace that transcends understanding, from total isolation to loving union with God. Each mansion represents a step where the previous fear is gradually healed by divine love, until in the 7th mansion, the soul rests in an embrace of absolute tenderness. What transforms this journey is precisely contemplative prayer, that, in a silence where the soul learns to hear the delicate voice of God whispering, "You are loved, you are safe, you are home with me." Gradually, the layers of fear give way. Nighttime worry diminishes. Racing thoughts gain a slower, more compassionate rhythm. And upon arriving at the final mansions, the soul discovers that it was never alone. God was there all along, patiently waiting for it to open itself to receive His unconditional and transformative love. Are you at the beginning of this journey, still trembling with that sacred fear that Teresa felt? Know that every step you take toward God, every prayer, every moment of trust, every act of surrender brings you closer to that 7th mansion, where terror completely dissolves into tenderness. God is already waiting for you there. The question is, are you ready to begin this journey of healing, of inner peace, of returning to the heart of who you truly are? The final call for transformation. You have come this far on this journey through the mansions of Teresa, walking from that first moment of sacred terror to the understanding that fear, when offered in prayer, becomes the gateway to the deepest peace. Now is the time to bring all of this into your real life, into the sleepless nights, the racing thoughts, that fear that wakes you in the middle of the night. Take your candle, sit in silence, and begin the path of perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest. Offer to God exactly what you feel. The fear, the anxiety, the worry about the future, the guilt of the past. Place everything at the feet of God and say, "I trust in you. Under your wings I find refuge. In your heart I dwell securely." Ask yourself these questions in the coming days. What is the fear that paralyzes me the most? What truth about God do I need to know so that this fear can be transformed into trust? What psycho-spiritual dwellings do I still need to traverse to reach final rest? And most importantly, am I truly willing to let God transform me, even if it means going through dark nights before reaching the light? These questions don't have easy answers, but formulating them is already the first step in true conversion. It's when you stop merely existing and begin to truly live. Remember, the fear you feel today is not punishment from God. It's an invitation. It's Psalm 23 whispering, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." It's the promise of refuge in the arms of the Most High, the divine protection that never abandons you, the peace of God that transcends all understanding. You are not alone on this journey. Millions of souls, like yours, have already walked this inner castle, and all have discovered the same truth, that in the heart of God dwells a tenderness so profound that it heals even the most ancient fear. Subscribe to this channel to continue this journey of healing, of mystical self, and of encountering the infinite love of God. May the peace of Christ always keep you.